A scorned bride hides marks of abuse beneath her wedding gown. On their wedding night, the distant duke who married her for convenience discovers the truth, and his indifference transforms into protective fury. Before we begin, please leave a comment telling us where you're listening to this story from. We'd love to know where our listeners are around the world. The morning of her wedding, Imogen Hartley stood perfectly still while a maid laced her corset with practiced indifference. The mirror reflected a woman of 24 in ivory silk, her dark hair arranged in fashionable curls, her face pale but composed. She looked every inch the proper bride. No one could see what lay beneath. "Tighter," she whispered, though each pull of the laces sent fire across her back where the wounds had not fully healed. The maid obliged without comment. Servants in her uncle's household had learned long ago not to ask questions. The door swung open without ceremony. Aunt Cordelia swept in, her expression equal parts satisfaction and disdain. "Well?" her aunt said, circling her like a buyer examining livestock. "You clean up adequately. I still cannot fathom how Richard managed to secure a duke for you." "A duke? For a plain, aging spinster with no fortune to speak of." Imogen kept her eyes lowered. "Uncle was very persuasive, I'm sure." "Persuasive?" Cordelia laughed, sharp and brittle. "He was desperate to be rid of you, and fortune smiled upon us. His Grace needed heirs and had no patience for another season of simpering debutantes. How convenient that he required a wife of childbearing age who would ask nothing of him emotionally." She adjusted one of Imogen's curls with more force than necessary. "You should be grateful, girl. This is far more than someone like you deserves." "I am grateful, Aunt." The words came automatically, hollowed out by years of practice. "See that you remember it. One word of complaint, one hint of dissatisfaction, and I shall ensure His Grace knows precisely how fortunate he is to have taken you off our hands." Cordelia's smile was vicious. "Now come, we cannot keep a duke waiting." The ceremony at St. George's Church passed in a blur of incense and murmured Latin. Percival Ashford, Duke of Thornfield, stood beside her, tall and imposing in his dark coat, his expression as inscrutable as the marble columns surrounding them. His hand was steady when it clasped hers, his voice firm when he spoke his vows. He looked at her exactly twice. Once when she entered, once when the vicar pronounced them man and wife. He did not kiss her. A slight bow of his head sufficed. The wedding breakfast at her uncle's London townhouse was an exercise in endurance. Imogen sat at the head table beside her new husband, who spoke politely with the guests, but rarely to her. She was acutely aware of every whisper, every curious glance from the ton's most influential families. "A toast!" Uncle Richard rose, glass in hand, his face florid with wine and self-satisfaction. "To my beloved niece and her most generous husband. Imogen, my dear, you must know how overjoyed we are to see you so splendidly settled. His Grace has shown remarkable charity in taking you under his wing. I trust you will prove yourself worthy of such benevolence." The word charity landed like a slap. Heat flooded Imogen's cheeks. Beside her, the Duke's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he raised his glass with the others. "Indeed," Percival said, his voice cool and measured. "I'm certain the Duchess will adapt admirably to her new position." It wasn't quite a defense, but nor was it agreement. Imogen wasn't sure which was worse. A warm laugh cut through the awkward silence that followed. Lord Edmund Ashford, the Duke's younger brother, appeared at their table with a rakish grin. "Come now, Uncle Richard, surely we can toast to happiness rather than charity. Percy's been absolutely unbearable these past weeks, snapping at everyone like a wounded bear. Clearly he needed a wife to civilize him." Several guests chuckled. Percival shot his brother a look that could have frozen the Thames. Edmund only grinned wider. There, you see. Even now. Terrifying. Your Grace, he said, bowing to Imogen with theatrical flourish. You have my deepest sympathies and my highest admiration. Despite herself, Imogen felt the corner of her mouth twitch. Edmund winked at her before returning to his seat. The reception seemed to last an eternity. When Percival finally rose and announced it was time to depart for Thornfield Hall, Imogen nearly sagged with relief. The carriage ride was silent. Percival sat across from her, his long legs stretched out, his gaze fixed on the passing countryside. Rain began to patter against the windows as London gave way to open fields and rolling hills. After an hour, he finally spoke. You will find Thornfield quite different from London. More isolated, certainly, but the grounds are extensive. You will have freedom to occupy your time as you see fit. Thank you, Your Grace. Percival, he corrected, though his tone remained formal. We are married now. The formalities are unnecessary in private. Percival, she repeated softly, testing the name on her tongue. He nodded once, then returned his attention to the window. The silence that followed was not hostile, but nor was it comfortable. It simply was, a void that seemed to sum up perfectly what this marriage would be. By the time they arrived at Thornfield Hall, dusk had fallen. The estate rose before them, all honey-coloured stone and mullioned windows glowing with lamplight. It was beautiful in a severe, imposing way that reminded Imogen of its master. The household staff stood assembled in the entrance hall. A woman of perhaps 55 stepped forward, her face kind despite its severity. Your Grace, she said, curtsying to Percival before turning to Imogen with a warmer smile. Your Grace, I am Mrs. Banks, the housekeeper. Welcome to Thornfield. We are delighted to have a duchess in residence once more. Something in the woman's voice, genuine, maternal, made Imogen's throat tighten unexpectedly. Thank you, Mrs. Banks. That is very kind. I've prepared the Duchess's apartments myself. Mrs. Banks continued. They adjoin His Grace's chambers. I thought you might wish to rest before dinner. Imogen glanced at Percival, who nodded. That would be appreciated. Mrs. Banks herself escorted Imogen up the grand staircase, keeping up a gentle stream of information about the household, the grounds, the staff. Her kindness felt like water after drought. If I may say so, Your Grace, Mrs. Banks said quietly as they reached the door to Imogen's new rooms. It does my heart good to see His Grace married again. He has been alone for too long. I hope you will both find happiness here. The words were well meant, but they only reminded Imogen that she was a replacement, a functional solution to a practical problem. Still, she smiled. Thank you, Mrs. Banks. The rooms were lovely, decorated in soft blues and creams. A fire crackled in the grate. Imogen dismissed the maid who came to help her undress, claiming fatigue. In truth, she couldn't bear to have anyone see her remove the gown, to risk exposing what lay beneath. She managed the buttons herself, though her arms ached by the time she freed herself from the constricting fabric. In only her chemise, she caught sight of herself in the mirror and immediately looked away. She knew what she would see, the raised pink lines crossing her back, some old and silver, others still angry and red. The tally of her uncle's temper, marked on her skin like a ledger of her failures. A light knock made her jump. Your Grace? It was a maid's voice. His Grace requests you join him for a light supper in the sitting-room between your chambers. Imogen's heart hammered. Of course. Tell him I will be there momentarily. She dressed quickly in a high-necked gown, her fingers trembling on the fastenings. When she entered the sitting-room, she found Percival standing by the window, still in his wedding clothes, though he'd removed his cravat. He looked tired, she thought. Human, rather than ducal. I thought we might dine privately tonight, he said. "The staff means well, but I assume you're as exhausted as I am by the day's performances." "Yes," she admitted. "Thank you." They ate in relative silence. Cold chicken, bread, cheese, wine. Percival poured her a glass himself, a small courtesy that surprised her. "I should tell you," he said finally, "what I expect from this marriage. I realize we have not discussed it plainly." Imogen set down her fork, her appetite vanishing. "Of course. I require heirs. That is the primary consideration. Beyond that—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I will not pretend to offer you affection. My first marriage was a love match, and I have no desire to attempt such a thing again, but I will offer you respect, security, and freedom within the bounds of propriety. In return, I ask only that you fulfill your duties as Duchess and cause no scandal." It was perhaps the most honest thing anyone had said to her in years. No false promises, no pretense, just a clear accounting of terms. "That seems entirely reasonable," Imogen said quietly. "I shall do my utmost to be a credit to your name." "I'm sure you will." He studied her for a moment, and something flickered in his grey eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or confusion. "Your uncle spoke as though you should be grateful beyond measure. Yet I confess I cannot determine what crime you've committed to warrant such treatment. You are educated, well-mannered, and not unattractive." The unexpected compliment made heat rise in her cheeks. "I am 24, your Percival, a spinster by any measure, and my dowry is negligible?" "I have no need of dowries." He refilled his wineglass. "As for your age, you are hardly ancient. The obsession with 17-year-old brides has always struck me as rather absurd." "That is unusually progressive of you." "Is it?" He almost smiled. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I simply prefer a wife who can hold a conversation." For the first time since she'd met him, Imogen felt something other than fear or resignation. Not quite hope. She wouldn't allow herself that. But perhaps the faintest possibility that this arrangement might be bearable. "It's late," Percival said, rising. "I imagine you'd like to retire. I have some correspondence to attend to in my study. I shall give you time to prepare for bed." The meaning was clear. He would come to her later, to consummate the marriage. It was expected, required even if he wanted those heirs he'd mentioned. Imogen stood, her legs suddenly unsteady. "Of course. Good night, Percival." "Good night." She retreated to her chambers, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was her duty. She had known it would come. She simply had to endure it. The maid had left a nightgown laid out, fine white cotton, modest but soft. Imogen undressed with shaking hands, then stared at the nightgown. The high neck would hide the worst of it, wouldn't it? In the dark, perhaps he wouldn't notice. Perhaps she could keep this one last secret. She pulled it on quickly, braided her hair, and climbed into the enormous bed. The sheets were cool against her skin. She tried to calm her breathing, to prepare herself mentally for what was coming. She had survived far worse than this. When the door to the adjoining chamber opened an hour later, Imogen forced herself to remain still. Percival entered quietly, wearing a dark dressing gown. He'd dismissed his valet, she realized. They were truly alone. "Imogen," he said softly, "are you awake?" "Yes." Her voice came out barely a whisper. He approached the bed slowly, as though afraid of startling her. The lamplight cast his face in shadow, making him seem even more imposing. When he sat on the edge of the mattress, she couldn't suppress a flinch. He noticed. Of course he noticed. "I will be gentle," he said, and there was something almost kind in his voice. "I know this is new for you." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her entire body was rigid with tension. Percival reached out to touch her shoulder, just a light touch, meant to be reassuring. But his fingers found the exact spot where the most recent wound had been, not quite healed, and pain shot through her like lightning. She gasped and jerked away before she could stop herself. Percival froze. "Did I hurt you?" "No, it's nothing. I apologize." She tried to compose herself, but her heart was racing. "Imogen!" His voice had changed, sharpened with concern. "You're trembling." "I'm fine. Truly, just nervous." But he was already moving closer, his brow furrowed. "You reacted as though I burned you. Let me see." "No!" The word came out too loud, too desperate. "Please, it's nothing. Can we just show me?" It wasn't a request this time. Not cruel, but firm. The voice of a man who expected to be obeyed. Tears pricked at her eyes. This was it, then. The moment he would see what she really was. Damaged, marked, unworthy. With shaking hands, she reached for the collar of her nightgown. Imogen's fingers trembled so violently she could barely grip the fabric. She pulled the nightgown down just enough to expose her shoulder, revealing the top edge of a scar, raised, angry, and unmistakably deliberate. Percival went absolutely still, his eyes fixed on the mark, and something terrible crossed his face. Not disgust, fury. "There are more, aren't there?" he said quietly. It wasn't a question. She couldn't speak, could only nod. "May I see them?" His voice had gone soft, carefully controlled. "Please." The please broke something in her. She turned slowly, presenting her back to him, and pulled the nightgown down to her waist. The chemise beneath revealed everything, the crosshatch of scars, old and new, that covered her back from shoulders to waist. A map of cruelty written on skin. The silence stretched so long she wanted to scream. She waited for the revulsion, the dismissal, the anger at being deceived into marrying damaged goods. Instead, she felt his fingers hover just above her skin, not touching but close enough that she could sense his presence. "Who did this to you?" His voice was barely audible, but there was something lethal in it. "Tell me who did this." "My uncle." The words came out broken. He believed in discipline, correction. I was willful, you see, disobedient. I spoke when I shouldn't have, read books that weren't appropriate, questioned things I should have accepted. He said he was trying to make me acceptable for society, to beat the stubbornness out of me. How long? Since I was 15, after my mother died and I came to live with them. 9 years. Each word fell like a stone. He did this for 9 years. Please don't. Her voice cracked. I know I should have told you, before the wedding. I know I'm damaged and I deceived you, and if you want to annul the marriage, I would understand. Stop! The word cracked like a whip. Percival moved around to face her, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. His grey eyes blazed with a fury so intense it should have frightened her, but somehow didn't, because none of it was directed at her. You think I want to annul our marriage because your uncle is a monster? He said it with such incredulity that she felt foolish. Imogen, look at me. She raised her eyes to his. You are not damaged, he said, each word deliberate and fierce. You survived. That makes you the strongest person in any room. Do you understand me? She shook her head, tears spilling over. I'm marked, scarred. I'm not what you thought you were getting. I thought I was getting a convenient arrangement, a wife who would require nothing from me emotionally. He moved closer, still not touching, but his presence enveloped her. What I got was a woman who endured hell and still managed to stand in that church today with her head high, who smiled at Edmund's terrible jokes and thanked Mrs. Banks with genuine kindness, despite having every reason to be bitter and broken. You are not what I thought I was getting, Imogen. You are far more. The words didn't make sense. None of this made sense. She had prepared herself for revulsion, for rejection. Not this. Never this. "He will never touch you again," Percival continued, his voice dropping to something dark and promising. "I will make certain of it. Do you believe me?" She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But 9 years of learning that no one would protect her, that she was alone, that she deserved what she received. 9 years of that couldn't be erased by one declaration. "I don't know," she whispered honestly. Something softened in his expression. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his intention, and touched her cheek with the backs of his fingers. So gentle it made her ache. "Then I will simply have to prove it to you." He pulled back, then retrieved his dressing gown from where it lay across a chair and draped it around her shoulders, covering her completely. "We will not consummate this marriage tonight. But you said you needed heirs. I need you to feel safe in your own bed more." He said it as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. "The rest can wait." Imogen stared at him. This stranger she'd married, who was acting nothing like she'd expected. "I don't understand you. I'm not sure I understand myself at the moment." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture making him look younger, more uncertain. "I expected tonight to be a formality, a duty fulfilled, but I find I cannot—" He stopped, jaw working. "You've been hurt enough. I won't add to it." "It's your right," she said quietly. "As my husband." "Rights," he said, the word like it tasted bitter. What a bloodless way to describe a marriage bed. "No, Imogen. When we come together, it will be because you want it, not because you're enduring it." The very concept was so foreign she didn't know how to respond. Want, as though her desires mattered, as though she were more than an obligation to be fulfilled. "I don't—" Her voice caught. "I don't think I know how to want things anymore." The look he gave her was devastatingly sad. "Then perhaps we'll both learn something new." He moved to the chair by the fire, settling into it as though he belonged there. "Tell me," he said, "about before your uncle. What were you like?" "Why?" "Because I have a feeling the woman you were meant to be is still in there somewhere, buried under his cruelty. And I'd like to meet her." Something cracked open in Imogen's chest. She pulled his dressing gown tighter around herself, inhaling the scent of sandalwood and something uniquely him. "I like to read," she said finally, hesitantly. "Especially things I wasn't supposed to. Gothic novels, scientific treatises, philosophy. My mother used to laugh and say I had an unsuitable mind for a lady." "It sounds like your mother was intelligent." "She was." A real smile ghosted across Imogen's lips. "She taught me French and Italian because, she said, limiting yourself to English limited your access to the world's great thinkers. My uncle burned her books after she died, said they'd put dangerous ideas in my head." "Dangerous ideas," Percival repeated. "Such as?" "That women might be capable of rational thought, that obedience without question might not be a virtue." Her voice gained strength. "That I deserved to be treated as more than property. All quite reasonable ideas in my estimation." She looked at him sharply, searching for mockery, but found only sincerity. "The library here is extensive," he continued. "It was my mother's pride. I'm certain there are several unsuitable books in it. You should feel free to corrupt yourself thoroughly." This time, her smile reached her eyes. "That's very progressive of you." "So you said earlier." He leaned back in the chair, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "I confess, I'm beginning to suspect my reputation for being conventional is entirely undeserved." They talked through the night. Or rather, Imogen talked, and Percival listened with an attention she'd never experienced. She told him about her mother's illness, about her loneliness in her uncle's house, about the small rebellions that had earned her punishments. He asked questions, thoughtful ones, as though her answers actually mattered. In turn, he told her about Thornfield, about his duties as Duke, about the weight of expectation. And finally, haltingly, he told her about Catherine. "She was my opposite in every way," he said, staring into the dying fire. "Vivacious, impulsive, utterly joyful. She could light up a room just by entering it. We were childhood friends who became something more. When we married, I thought—" His voice tightened. "I thought we would have decades together." "How long were you married?" 2 years. She was carrying our first child when the accident happened." He paused. "The axle broke on the carriage. A stupid, mundane failure. She died instantly. The baby—" He swallowed hard. "The baby didn't survive either. A son." Imogen's heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry. After that I couldn't—" He gestured vaguely. "Everyone expected me to grieve for a suitable period and then find another bride. But the thought of letting someone in like that again, of risking that kind of pain, I couldn't do it. So I waited, and waited, until my brother and the estate solicitors made it clear I was being irresponsible, that I needed heirs. So I decided to find a practical solution, a marriage of convenience with someone who wouldn't expect love." "And you found me," Imogen said softly. "The spinster no one wanted. I thought I was being clever." His laugh was self-deprecating. "I thought I could wall myself off, keep everything simple and transactional. But then you walked down that aisle, looking so resigned, and something in me shifted. I told myself it was pity, that I felt sorry for you being married off to an emotionally unavailable widower. And now—" He met her eyes across the darkened room. "Now I don't know what I feel, except that when I saw those scars, when I understood what you've survived, I wanted to tear your uncle apart with my bare hands. And that's not pity, Imogen. That's something else entirely." She didn't know what to say. Her heart was beating too fast, hope and fear tangling together until she couldn't separate them. "You should sleep," Percival said finally, rising from the chair. "It's nearly dawn. Where will you sleep?" "The chair is comfortable enough." "Don't be ridiculous. The bed is enormous." The words came out before she could stop them, and she immediately wanted to take them back. "I mean, you don't have to, of course, but are you certain?" She nodded. The thought of being alone suddenly seemed worse than the thought of sharing the space. Percival extinguished the lamps, and they climbed into opposite sides of the massive bed. The darkness was complete, the silence profound. "Imogen?" His voice came from the darkness. "Yes?" "Thank you for telling me, for trusting me with the truth. I didn't have much choice." "You did. You could have lied, made excuses. You chose honesty instead." She heard the rustle of sheets as he shifted. "That takes courage." She didn't feel courageous. She felt exhausted, raw, terrified. But also for the first time in 9 years, not quite so alone. In the darkness, she felt his hand reach across the space between them. Not grabbing, just resting on the sheet near hers. An offering. After a moment's hesitation, she moved her hand until her fingers brushed his. Neither of them pulled away. The next week passed in a strange, suspended reality. Percival didn't push her, didn't demand anything. Instead, he courted her, not like a husband with rights to claim, but like a man trying to win a woman's trust. He invited her to breakfast, showed her the estate, introduced her to the tenants. He brought her books from the library, asked her opinions on estate matters, included her in decisions. Small things. Constant things. Mrs. Banks watched it all with barely concealed delight. "His Grace is different," she told Imogen one afternoon while they reviewed the household accounts. Since Her Grace Catherine passed, he's been like a ghost in his own home. But this past week I've heard him laugh twice. That's twice more than in 3 years. He's being kind, Imogen said quietly. He's being himself again. Mrs. Banks patted her hand. Whatever you're doing, dear, keep doing it. But Imogen wasn't doing anything. She was simply existing, being honest, not hiding quite so much. It was terrifying. Edmund arrived on the 5th day as effervescent as ever. He found them in the library, where Percival was helping Imogen reach a book on a high shelf. "Good God!" Edmund announced dramatically. "Is that a smile on my brother's face? Someone fetch the magistrate. This is clearly an impostor." Percival shot him a withering look, but his lips twitched. "Edmund," Imogen said, grateful for his presence despite, or perhaps because of, his irreverence. "How lovely to see you. And you, dear sister. Though I must say, marriage to my brother seems to suit you far better than it should." He threw himself into a chair. "I've come to ensure Percy isn't boring you to tears with talk of crop rotations and parliamentary procedure." "I was not—" Percival began. "You absolutely were. I could hear the drudgery from the entrance hall." Edmund grinned. "I'm saving her from you. You're welcome." Despite herself, Imogen laughed. It felt strange, the sound of it, but good. "There." Edmund pointed at her triumphantly. Laughter. "Percy, when was the last time you made a woman laugh?" "This morning, actually," Percival said mildly, "when I told her about your fear of horses. That is, I am not afraid of horses. I simply prefer we maintain a respectful distance from one another. It's philosophical." This time, both Imogen and Percival laughed. Edmund stayed for dinner, regaling them with scandalous stories from London that made Percival scowl and Imogen hide her smile behind her wine glass. It was the most normal, pleasant evening she could remember. After Edmund departed, Percival walked Imogen to her chambers, a nightly ritual they'd developed. "He's exhausting," Percival said, but there was affection in his voice. "He's wonderful." Imogen countered. "He loves you very much." "I suppose he does, though God knows why." They stopped at her door. These moments had become charged, both of them aware of what they weren't doing, what they were waiting for. "Percival," Imogen said softly, "I want to thank you." "For what?" "For being patient, for not pushing, for treating me like—" She struggled for the words. "Like I matter." His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "You do matter, Imogen. More than I expected. More than is probably wise." Her heart stuttered. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said carefully, "that this marriage was supposed to be practical, convenient, safe." His eyes searched hers. "But when I'm with you, I don't feel safe at all. I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying and wonderful." "That sounds awful," she whispered. "It is." He smiled, soft and real. "It's also the most alive I've felt in 3 years." Before she could respond, before she could think, she pushed up on her toes and kissed him. It was brief, chaste, terrified, but it was hers, her choice, her desire. When she pulled back, Percival looked stunned. "Was that—" He stopped, started again. "Did you want to do that?" "Yes." Her cheeks burned. "I think so. I'm not entirely sure. I've never—" He kissed her again, properly this time. Gentle but sure, one hand cradling her face, the other at her waist. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "I should let you rest," he said, voice rough. "Stay." The word escaped before she could call it back. "Not for— I mean, just to sleep, like we did before. Are you certain?" She nodded. They prepared for bed in their separate chambers, then met in hers. The routine was becoming familiar, comfortable. Percival in his shirt sleeves, Imogen in her nightgown, the lamp burning low. But tonight was different. Tonight, when they climbed into bed, Percival opened his arms in invitation. After a moment's hesitation, Imogen moved into them, letting him hold her carefully, aware of her back, of her scars. "Is this all right?" he murmured against her hair. Yes. And it was. More than all right. For the first time in 9 years, she felt safe. The letter arrived a week later. Imogen was in the morning room when the footman brought the silver tray bearing a single envelope. She recognized her uncle's handwriting immediately and felt ice slide down her spine. Her hands shook as she opened it. "My dear niece, I trust you are settling into your new position satisfactorily. Lady Cordelia and I plan to visit Thornfield next week to ensure you are fulfilling your duties properly. We should hate for His Grace to discover he has made an unfortunate choice of bride. Your devoted uncle, Sir Richard Hartley." The paper fluttered from her fingers. She couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in, the room spinning. He was coming here. He would be in her home, in her sanctuary, and she would have to smile and curtsy and pretend. "Imogen." She looked up to find Percival in the doorway, concern etched on his face. He crossed to her in 3 strides. "What's wrong? You've gone pale." His eyes fell on the letter. "What is that?" She couldn't speak, could only shake her head as panic clawed at her throat. Percival picked up the letter, read it swiftly. Something dangerous flickered across his expression. "No," he said flatly. "He's my uncle. I can't—" "You can. You will." He pulled her to her feet, hands firm on her shoulders. "Imogen, look at me. Do you truly believe I would allow that man into my home? Into your home? He'll cause a scandal if you refuse him. He'll tell people—" "Let him talk. I am a duke. He is nothing." The steel in his voice was absolute. "He hurt you for years, and no one stopped him. I will not be another person who fails to protect you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You don't understand. He'll find a way to hurt me. He always does. And now I've brought you into this, and he'll hurt you too. Imogen." Percival cupped her face in both hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I am not afraid of him. And you shouldn't be either. Not anymore. I can't help it. I know it's foolish, but when I think of seeing him again, I can't breathe. Then you won't see him." He pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head. "I'll handle this. Trust me, please." She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But trust was a muscle she'd forgotten how to use. "What will you do?" She whispered against his shirt. "What I should have done the moment I learned what he'd done to you." His voice was dark with promise. "I'm going to make him understand exactly what it means to have threatened something of mine." The possessiveness in his words should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel protected, valued, claimed in a way that had nothing to do with ownership and everything to do with care. "I don't want you to go," she admitted. "I'll only be gone 2 days, 3 at most." He pulled back enough to look at her. "Mrs. Banks will stay with you. Edmund too, if you'd like." "Edmund? He's useless in a crisis, but excellent at distraction." A hint of dark humor crossed his face. "And if your uncle somehow gets past me, Edmund can bore him to death with horse philosophy." Despite everything, she almost smiled. "That's better." Percival brushed his thumb across her cheek, wiping away a tear. "When I return, your uncle will never trouble you again. I swear it." She believed him. Against all reason, all experience, she believed him. Percival left before dawn the next morning. Imogen stood at her window and watched his carriage disappear down the tree-lined drive, anxiety coiling in her stomach like a living thing. "He'll be fine, dear," Mrs. Banks said from the doorway. "His Grace can be quite formidable when properly motivated." "That's what worries me," Imogen admitted. "I don't want him to do anything that might damage his reputation." "Reputation?" Mrs. Banks sniffed. "His Grace's reputation has been tragic widower for 3 years. I'd say protective husband is a marked improvement." Edmund arrived an hour later, as promised, carrying a bottle of wine and an expression of dramatic determination. "Right," he announced, sweeping into the drawing room where Imogen sat pretending to embroider. "Percy has enlisted me as keeper of the Duchess. I'm to ensure you don't worry yourself into a decline, which seems like a terrible responsibility to give me, but here we are." Despite her anxiety, Imogen felt her lips curve. "And how do you propose to accomplish this?" "Wine, scandal, and possibly teaching you to play cards." He threw himself into a chair. "Percy would disapprove of all 3, which makes them perfect choices." He was as good as his word. For 2 days, Edmund kept her so thoroughly distracted she barely had time to spiral into fear. He taught her piquet and vingt-et-un, told her scandalous stories about Percy's youth, and made her laugh until her sides ached. "You're good for him, you know," Edmund said on the second evening, his usual levity dimmed by wine and honesty. "I haven't seen Percy like this since Catherine. I was beginning to think he'd closed himself off forever." He loved her very much. He did, but that's not mutually exclusive with loving again. Edmund studied her. "I think he's already halfway there, whether he's admitted it to himself or not." Imogen's heart stuttered. "You're imagining things." "I'm extremely perceptive. It's my burden." He grinned. "Also, he looks at you the way I look at a perfectly prepared roast, like he wants to devour you and savor every moment." "Edmund! What, it's a compliment?" She threw a cushion at him. Percival returned on the 3rd day, just as the sun was setting. Imogen heard the carriage and was on her feet before she could think, propriety forgotten. She met him in the entrance hall, where he was handing his coat to a footman. Their eyes met across the space. Something in his expression made her breath catch. Satisfaction, determination, and something warmer. "It's done," he said simply. She wanted to ask what that meant, but the servants were watching, and Mrs. Banks was beaming, and Edmund had appeared on the stairs with an expression of theatrical curiosity. "Welcome back, brother dear. Do tell us you've committed no felonies." "Not technically," Percival replied, his gaze never leaving Imogen's face. "Might I have a word with my wife? In private?" They went to the library. Percival closed the door, and suddenly they were alone, the air between them charged with something Imogen couldn't name. "What did you do?" she asked. "I paid a visit to your uncle." Percival's voice was carefully controlled. "I informed him that any further contact with you, directly or through intermediaries, would be considered a threat to a duchess of the realm. I also made it known to several influential members of the ton that Sir Richard Hartley is not to be received in polite society. You've ruined him. I've isolated him. There's a difference." His jaw tightened. "I also ensured that certain people are now aware of his disciplinary methods. The whispers have begun. He'll find his social standing significantly diminished." "He'll be furious." "Let him be." Percival moved closer. "I told him that if he comes within 50 miles of you, if he so much as writes another letter, I will ensure he loses everything, his house, his position, his reputation. And unlike most men, I have the power to make that happen." Tears welled in Imogen's eyes, but these were different. Not fear, something else. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because this marriage began as convenience, but somewhere between your courage and my broken heart, it became real." His hand came up to cup her cheek. "You asked me to trust you with my pain when I told you about Catherine. You've been honest with me about your scars. I think it's time I'm honest about mine." "What do you mean?" I mean that I've been lying to myself." He moved closer still, until barely a breath separated them. "I told myself I could marry you and keep my distance, that I could protect my heart by keeping this transactional. But the truth is, I started falling for you the moment you stood in that church, looking resigned to a loveless marriage, and I realized you were far stronger than I'd ever be." Her breath caught. "Percival!" "I love you, Imogen." The words were quiet, fierce, certain. "Not because you need protection, though I will protect you with everything I have. Not out of pity or obligation, but because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to want to wake up in the morning. Because you make me laugh. Because your strength humbles me. Because somewhere in the last 3 weeks, you've become the most important thing in my world." She couldn't speak, could only stare at him, this man who'd been a stranger, a convenience, a duty, and had become so much more. "You don't have to say anything," he continued, though something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. "I know this isn't what you agreed to. I know you wanted safety and security, not—" She kissed him. It wasn't tentative this time. It was desperate, grateful, real. She poured everything she couldn't say into it, the hope she'd been afraid to feel, the trust she'd been afraid to give, the love she'd been too terrified to name. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Percival rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought I deserved to be loved," Imogen whispered. "My uncle told me I was too difficult, too broken, too marked. I believed him. He was wrong." Percival's hands framed her face. "You are not difficult. You are strong. You are not broken. You survived. And these marks—" His fingers ghosted over her shoulder, where he knew the scars lay beneath the fabric. "These are proof of your courage. They are part of you, and I love every part of you. I love you too." The words came out choked, reverent. "I didn't know I could, didn't know I was allowed, but I do. I love you." He kissed her again, slower this time, thorough and claiming. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with promise. "I'd very much like to take you to bed," he said, voice rough. "If you'll have me." "Yes." No hesitation, no fear. "Yes." 3 weeks later, moonlight streamed through the windows of the Duchess's chambers, painting everything in silver. Imogen lay in the enormous bed, sheets pooled at her waist, Percival's arm draped possessively across her stomach. "Tell me again," she murmured. "Which part?" His voice was sleepy, satisfied. "The part where this is real, where I'm not going to wake up and find it was all a dream." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with an expression so tender it made her ache. "This is real." He traced a finger along her collarbone, down her arm. "You are my wife, my Duchess, the woman I love beyond reason." His hand moved to her back, to the scars he no longer avoided. Instead, he traced them with reverent fingers. "These are proof you survived. They are beautiful because they are part of you." She'd stopped flinching when he touched them, had started to believe him when he said they didn't diminish her, that she was whole, not broken. "Sometimes I still can't believe you're real," she admitted, "that this is real. Shall I prove it to you again?" There was dark humor in his voice, and heat. She laughed, swatting his chest. "Again, you're insatiable. Only with you." He kissed her shoulder, her neck, the sensitive spot behind her ear that made her shiver. "It's your fault for being so devastatingly lovable." "Lovable." She tested the word, still marveling at it. "I never thought I'd be called that." "Get used to it." He pulled her closer, until they were tangled together completely. "I intend to tell you approximately 6 times a day for the rest of our lives." A knock at the door made them both freeze. Percival groaned. "If that's Edmund, I'm going to murder him." "Your Grace." It was Mrs. Banks, sounding amused. "Lord Edmund has arrived with Lady Ashford. They're demanding dinner and say they won't leave until they've seen the Duchess." Percival looked at Imogen, eyebrows raised in question. She nodded, smiling. "Tell them half an hour." Percival called. "Very good, Your Grace." When the footsteps faded, Imogen turned to her husband. "Lady Ashford. My aunt, Edmund's mother technically, though she raised me after my parents died. She's—" He paused, searching for words. "Formidable. You'll either love her or be terrified of her." "Both?" "Usually both." He kissed her forehead. "But she'll adore you. Fair warning, she'll probably demand to know when she can expect grandnieces and grandnephews." Imogen blushed. "That's rather presumptuous." "That's Aunt Letitia." He grinned. "Come on. We should dress before Edmund breaks down the door." They made it downstairs with minutes to spare. Lady Letitia Ashford was indeed formidable, tall, elegant, with sharp eyes that saw everything. But when she looked at Imogen, her expression softened. "So you're the woman who's worked this miracle," she said, pulling Imogen into an unexpected embrace. "I knew Percy was married, but I didn't realize he was in love until Edmund sent word. Thank you, my dear. Thank you for bringing him back to us." Dinner was chaotic. Wonderful. Edmund told outrageous stories. Lady Letitia demanded details about the wedding and made pointed comments about great-grandchildren. Percival held Imogen's hand under the table the entire time, thumb stroking across her knuckles. At one point, Edmund raised his glass. "To the Duke and Duchess of Thornfield, may your marriage be filled with love, laughter, and significantly fewer horses than mine will be." "Hear, hear," Lady Letitia agreed. Imogen looked around the table, at Edmund's grin, at Lady Letitia's warm approval, at Mrs. Banks watching from the doorway with satisfaction, at Percival gazing at her like she hung the moon. This was family. Real family. The kind that protected instead of hurt, that celebrated instead of diminished. When everyone finally departed and they were alone again, Percival led her back upstairs. But instead of going to the bedroom, he took her to the balcony overlooking the gardens. "I wanted to show you something," he said. The moon was full, turning the grounds into something from a fairy tale. In the distance, she could see the woods where they'd walked just yesterday. The rose garden where she'd found her first genuine peace. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "This is yours now, all of it." He stood behind her, arms wrapped around her waist. Thornfield, the London house, every property, every resource. But more than that, he turned her to face him. "You have me, all of me. The broken parts, the healing parts, everything. You are not alone anymore, Imogen. You will never be alone again." She leaned up and kissed him, soft and deep and full of promise. "Neither will you," she said against his lips. "We'll heal each other. We already have." He rested his forehead against hers. "The moment you walked into my life with your scars and your courage and your impossible strength, you began healing me. And I intend to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you deserve every happiness you've been denied." "I think," Imogen said, smiling through tears, "you've already started." They stood there in the moonlight, two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other, and knew, with absolute certainty, that this was only the beginning.